Welcome back to another episode of the Gen Future Podcast. Today I have Lindsay with me. She is the Director of Technical Advancement at ASCE, and it's just an honor to have her here. Lindsay, do you want to just give us a quick overview of what you do and the things you're doing at ASCE?
Sure, absolutely. And thanks for having me today. Really excited to be on the show. Been tuning into a couple episodes and love it. So, good question. What do I do at ASCE? I will jokingly tell you that I'm still figuring it out. I've been working at the society level of ASCE since October 2021. So I'm just hitting my really 4.5 month period. So I am still learning a lot about my role as Director of Technical Advancement, and we can talk about that a little bit more in the show. But for those of you who may not be familiar with the American Society of Civil Engineers, or ASCE, we represent more than 150,000 members in the civil engineering profession in 177 countries. And we're the nation's oldest civil engineering society, founded back in 1852. So I wanted to give a little background on ASCE. And really, it's through our active membership. ASCE is the leading technical provider of conferences, continuing education. We're the world's largest provider of civil engineering content, and absolutely an authoritative source for codes and standards that protect the public health, safety, and welfare. So, from a big picture, ASCE is really setting the path for the civil engineering industry. And back to your original question, as an ASCE staff member, my primary goal is to support our members. In my day to day life, I'm coordinating with volunteers, I'm supporting their progress on various technical projects, I'm managing a small staff team, and of course, there's some administrative work. Right now, we're preparing our budgets for fiscal year 2023 and developing some guidance documents for our standards committees.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I've been part of ASCE for a long time, just in various things and committees and conferences and everything. So I know there's a lot of great work that obviously the staff in general does. I'm curious because you were an engineer that was working as an engineer before. How's that transition into now working like full time as a staff in at ASCE?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely, really interesting. I transitioned after spending about 10 years in the civil and environmental consulting arena as an engineer. And I first started working in the nonprofit sector for ASCE Texas section, specifically the Texas section of ASCE, which has a small 3-person staff team in Austin, Texas. And I had to figure out a lot of new information really quickly. Of course, I leveraged everything I knew from project management and communicating at an engineering company, but I essentially left that job to run a small business. And I was their first full-time executive director. They had a executive director part-time prior, actually several, that I owe a lot of gratitude for, or a lot of gratitude to. But it was a new role for me. It was a new role for the organization. And I was involved in things like human resources, lease execution for office space and equipment, managing vendors, and managing non engineering staff. So that was probably one of the hardest things I had to do that was the most different from consulting engineering is managing non engineering staff. The career pathway for engineers is usually really clear cut, right? Like we start as a staff engineer, we go on to maybe a project engineer or senior staff engineer, and there's a leadership pathway and a career progression pathway that's usually clearly defined at many engineering consulting firms in the private sector. When you work at a different type of company, it's not always that clear cut. And so I was managing staff that I didn't know what they do per se on a detailed level. I had a team that could build a website. I had vendors that could support building the website, but I don't know how to build a website. So, how do you manage somebody when you don't
Mhm.
know the ins and outs of their job? Basically, you have to trust and verify. That's the main rule. And make sure you hire a really great team. But that was one of the biggest challenges of leaving the traditional engineering sector to work in a different type of business model.
Yeah, and I guess with that, like, how does that career path look like? How do you become someone that works for a nonprofit? Like, how was your experience kind of getting to become a staff at ASE? Like, did you have to apply for it? Did you just kind of get nominated? Kind of just explore a little bit of that.
Oh, absolutely. It's very similar to any other job pathway. You've got to go through the application and recruiting process, the interview process. I saw a posting for ASCE Texas section while I was working at my consulting job, and I had already thought about, maybe this isn't the right fit for me. What other opportunities might be out there? And I saw that job posting and thought, wow, I love ASCE. I
Mhm.
love the mission. I love the vision. I didn't know there was a job opportunity with ASCE. So, in the nonprofit sector, I don't know if we do the best job advertising. You can actually come work for us, and we do have opportunities. And beyond ASCE, too, I can go into some others in a little bit. But coming from an engineering background, we're all about continuing education, credentials, certification. And when I made that transition to the nonprofit sector, I realized I had a knowledge gap. I went to school to learn how to be an engineer. I didn't go to school to learn how to be a nonprofit or an association executive. So, what did I do? I took training. I got a new credential. I got the Certified Association Executive credential, which required 100 hours of continuing education in the field of association management and a test that was painful, but not as painful as the PE, but not easy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that's a path that we don't really think about. I mean, obviously, as engineers, we interact with AC a lot through just volunteering, either at the local level or national level. You may have seen like codes and standards and other education material. You're part of maybe the communities with AC Clover and such, but you don't really think about, okay, I want to work at ASC as a staff member. You always just kind of see ASC as part of supporting your career as an engineer, giving you the resources to become a better engineer. What has been your experience now that you're working at staff in that relation in terms of the support that ASC really gives companies and individuals in terms of like technical knowledge and just anything related to the career advancement?
Yeah, ASCE, like many other nonprofits, can advocate for the industry as a whole. And they can play a role different with the resources that they have and the breadth of membership that they have than your traditional private sector company or even public sector could play. So we're leveraging members from across all areas of civil engineering. Take the infrastructure report card, for example. ASC has been advocating for increased infrastructure funding for over 20 years and educating the general public and elected officials about infrastructure's true cost. And last year, last November, we celebrated a huge success. We had the passing of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that act brings over $550 billion worth of funding for new projects to infrastructure. And what that means is jobs for companies that are working in the infrastructure industry. So we are helping to not only support economic growth and prosperity across our nation, because we all rely on infrastructure, not just civil engineers, but we are contributing to job opportunities for private companies. So we're happy to advocate for the profession, share our knowledge with the general public, educate them on infrastructure issues. And I mentioned we also leverage all sectors of our industry to share our knowledge. So
Mhm.
by working with members of academia, the private, the public sector, the nonprofit sectors, we can all come together and work on something like a standard of practice. And engineering firms alone just don't have the resources to do that type of work. The other thing that nonprofits, and specifically, of course, ASC is good at this, and I'm biased,
Mhm.
is that we have training. So if your
Mhm.
company doesn't have the resources to train new engineers, mid level engineers, senior engineers, we have those resources available to our members and we provide opportunities to build relationships. So if you're looking to, I don't know, hire a new staff engineer, hire a new project manager, find somebody to partner with, being involved in these nonprofit associations is putting you in the right room, giving you the opportunity to connect with others. And that's a great place to be.
Yeah, and I think just the networking aspect of it, just being able to have this network of engineers that are doing similar things and being able to consult the codes. There's a lot of webinars, conferences that you can attend, PDHs. There's a lot of information that ASC kind of puts together in terms of that technical knowledge that we need to advance in our careers that continuously evolves with research, with journals, with all this information that it's available out there that then we can use in our practice on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's definitely super important. What is your role right now at ACE, and how has that changed from maybe your engineering career in terms of maybe that technical side that we think of engineers usually have, and obviously at ASCE um, with the number of people that are there, how does that transition came to be, as well as that difference between a technical engineer now, maybe a technical aspect in ASCE?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely a people person. I wanted
Mhm.
to study engineering because I want to help make the world a better place. And I loved my physics class in high school, so kudos to that. But the world of technical engineering, while I am a licensed professional engineer and I do have the background, doing those highly technical tasks like running hydrologic models or performing slope stability calculations was not the most favorite part of my day-to-day job. I love the management aspects of my job, working on schedules, budgets, communicating and updating stakeholders. I want to be connected with people. And luckily, in a virtual environment, I'm on Teams all the time, and I'm very thankful for that. But I use my people skills and my management skills every day, and I love that. Sometimes I do miss the technical work, but I'd really rather be a communicator, connecting the dots and help work on big projects that move our industry forward.
Yeah, and I think that's an important mission that obviously, again, we've talked about career paths a little bit here and previous episodes as well, but there's so many things engineers can really do depending on what they want to do. Like you can become a project manager, you can become a technical director at a company, you can focus 100% on that technical side or 100% on the people side. So it's finding that balance between the two. And obviously for you, it looks like it was more on that people side, and now you're in a career that is allowing you to do that.
Yeah,
Why should other engineers consider volunteering more with ASE and maybe potentially go and work for ASE?
yeah, absolutely. And I'll I'll mention some other nonprofit industries too that I think are really cool. Of course, ASCE is where my heart is, but engineers in general, to not be biased, any
Mhm.
place you can volunteer, any association is 100% worth your time, and you're going to get out of it exactly what you put in. So, being a dues paying member of ASCE or NSPE or any of the other organizations out there, that's great. We appreciate the financial contributions, but getting involved in the projects gives you the opportunity to sit at the table and meet people you may not meet in your day to day engineering job. That could lead to new job opportunities, it could lead to collaborations, and it leads to education. Maybe there's a particular type of project that your company doesn't work on, or maybe a practice area that they want to develop. Well, if you're interacting with other engineers through a volunteer role, you might get some ideas, you might share some knowledge. So it's really going outside of your comfort zone and expanding your circle of knowledge, expanding your relationships, and doing something beyond just your day-to-day job. I find it to be very rewarding. Before I was working in the nonprofit industry, I was a very active member of ASCE, and there's so many times where that membership led to a really great career opportunity. It also led to my bosses taking notice of the work I was doing as a volunteer. And I like to think, if you can manage a volunteer team and get something done with a group of people who aren't getting paid, you can't give a bonus, you can't give them a raise, but you can get something meaningful done. Imagine what you could do in your paying job when you have some of those additional financial resources. So if you can be a leader in a volunteer project, absolutely you can be a leader in your day job. And if you happen to be a leader in your volunteer projects and maybe things don't go so well, you're probably not going to get fired, and it's a good training ground. So for our younger engineers just starting off, you know, try something in the volunteer arena before you try it in your day job.
Yeah, and I guess with that, like, what do you recommend younger engineers do if they're wanting to get into the leadership positions, obviously that are going to be helping them in their careers, and just kind of explore a little bit more of that in terms of a younger engineer trying to gain those skills and why is it important?
Yeah, absolutely. The opportunities are endless, and sometimes I think that causes us not to raise our hands immediately. Analysis paralysis. ASCE, for example, has over 700 committees at the society level. There is so much work that is happening through all of our amazing volunteers and members. We have 90 plus sections across the globe and 160 branches, almost 400 student chapters, and over 100 younger member groups. So, all those stats are really intimidating, I know. But the point is, there is a place for anybody, for everybody, no matter what your interest is. If you're interested in a particular technical area of civil engineering, there's a group of like minded professionals out there who want to talk to you, want to know what your thoughts are in that particular practice area. If you are new to a city, and I'll use myself as an example, I moved to Austin, Texas in 2011 as a civil engineer. I didn't know anybody. I came from Florida. I didn't go to school here. I did not have any friends. And so I went to an ASCE meeting in Austin and I instantly made friends. I got connected. I was part of their younger member group and it was so much fun. So not only is it good for your career, but it was also great for my personal life. I have some lifelong friendships that I've made and cultivated through those meetings at ASCE, and I know they will continue on. And it just really was inspiring to be around a group of other like minded professionals. I do want to touch on the other opportunity, though. Aside from volunteering, I would encourage any engineers, any of your listeners, to consider working in the nonprofit sector. Maybe there's a reason you want to think about a job change. There's tons of opportunities in the private sector, tons of opportunities in the public sector, and those jobs are great for a variety of reasons. But when you're thinking about a switch, maybe think about the nonprofit sector if this speaks to you and you really want to help others at a bigger level. ASC is currently looking for a senior manager of infrastructure initiatives, also a senior manager of industry engagement, and we have a ton of technical positions coming up on our various institute staff teams from time to time. So you can always check our website for that. But there are other groups too. The National Society of Professional Engineers is a super strong advocate of the engineering license. They support math counts and attracting young people to engineering. Girl Scouts has a huge STEM effort. The Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure, or ISI, who helps to manage the Envision Framework program, is probably always looking for engineers. So there's a ton of opportunities if you think outside of the box of what your engineering career could look like. It doesn't have to be technical if that's not your calling. There's so many other places. And aside from your typical nonprofit or association work, there's also trade associations. And through my role in ASCE, I've recently connected with a number of people from the American Institute of Steel Construction, American Concrete Institute, American Iron and Steel Institute, American Concrete Pipe Association. I could go on and on. So there's trade
Mhm.
associations that are constantly looking for really smart engineers, and they would be interested in technical engineers too as they continue to develop and advance their products for their industry. So there's opportunities. I don't know. When you're thinking about job opportunities, I know it's a hot market right now, but there's more out there than just what you typically might think of.
Yeah, and again, I obviously interact with a lot of people in ACE and EWB that are staff members that work there full time, and you can see that there's always that passion of helping others, of the volunteering mindset of, uh, especially if you're part of like your local chapter or something, you see that everyone's kind of actively engaged and involved with that, which is great. And I think some of the best leadership experience I've got from just volunteering and being part of this organization. So I think that's kind of a side benefit that translates well if you don't really want to make the jump the full way into kind of working at these nonprofits into your job day to day. But ultimately, if you do want to make that jump, now you have experience within the organization. You're probably well known in the organization, so I will think that makes that transition a little easier, which is
Absolutely.
great.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. You're so right there. I think for myself personally, being an active member of ASCE, when I saw an ASC job posting come available, I thought, all right, well, I already know a little bit about the organization. I will say I'm still learning about the organization, and in total, I've been working for ASCE or the Texas section for over 5 years, and I have a ton to learn still. So there's a lot happening. I mentioned this, numerous committees and geographic units, a lifelong journey of learning.
Yeah. So within that role at ACE, do you get to interact a lot with like companies directly, or is mainly just kind of the technical side of it, just like codes and standards? Like, What is your day to day look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I support, as Director of Technical Advancement for ASCE, I support ASCE's Committee on Technical Advancement. And Committee on Technical Advancement is one of ASCE's five standing society level committees. They have nine constituent committees and divisions, and that ranges across a very, very diverse group of specialty technical areas from aerospace, computing, cold regions, energy, and forensic engineering to climate change adaptation, infrastructure resilience, and sustainability. I like to think about technical areas that may not fit into one of ASC's traditional institutes are typically under the Committee on Technical Advancement, and that's the group of engineers I have the pleasure of supporting. I also support under the Committee on Technical Advancement the Codes and Standards Committee, which is responsible for oversight and administration of over 70 ASCE technical standards produced in collaboration with our institutes. So I get to support these groups. They typically have conferences, they publish journals, they help to support the standards program, like I mentioned. And it's a very rewarding job to work with such a broad range of engineers. And although I'm not contributing like any technical information to those reports or publications or conferences, I am listening to the work that's happening. And because I get to interact with all those groups, I can help liaise. We have volunteers that are specifically assigned as liaisons, but as a staff member, I get to listen into all these conversations and I can help connect the dots. I can help identify opportunities where perhaps one group might collaborate with another group on a particular project. I mentioned sustainability is one of my groups. Infrastructure resilience is one of our groups too. And I have a staff team that also helps with all of this. So I don't want to take all the credit because I have an amazing group of staff members I get to work with. But sustainability applies to everything we do. Resilience
Mhm.
applies to everything we do. So we get to do cross-cutting projects and help support volunteers who are interested in working across the various disciplines of ASCE.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of work that happens behind the scenes, and like, I mean, when you're a student, you obviously hear ASC 7, all the codes, and you use them and apply them to your engineering career. But there's a lot of work that comes from developing those codes, a lot of research, a lot of meetings and stuff like that. So it's always interesting to me when I go to Structures Congress, kind of maybe sit in one of those committee meetings and just hear what it's being talked about, like where new things added to the code, maybe things that need to be changed. It's always just so interesting to see where those codes and standards are coming from. Is that your
Yeah,
perspective coming from, like, obviously you were an engineer, now working behind the scenes, developing and helping these codes kind of become reality?
it is amazing to understand the inner workings of how something becomes the go-to authority
Hmm.
for a particular technical topic, like you mentioned ASCE 7, our structural code for building loads and other structures, or sorry, design loads and other structures. It's amazing. There are over 200 volunteers who help with that effort, and it takes
Hmm.
about 5 years to produce such
Yeah.
a document. There's no way that any one group could do that as a for profit business, for example. All those volunteers, all those hours, putting it out to advance the practice and to make sure that our structures are safe. Again, protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public is our number one charge as a civil engineer. We just couldn't do that without groups like ASC that allow us to get together and work on the state of the practice projects. It's so fascinating to see what happens behind the scenes. And it's a very stringent process.
Yeah.
Not all of our standards, but some of our standards are considered ANSI standards, and ASCE in general is considered an accredited standards developing organization through the American National Standards Institute. And there's some
Mhm.
very strict requirements we follow to develop these standards. So it's interesting to me to go to a committee meeting that's very procedural. Perhaps we're using Robert's Rules of Order. We're taking very detailed meeting minutes. We're documenting decisions that were made on these products to ensure we do have consensus across the wide variety of users of these particular codes and standards. So it's just, to me, it's fascinating. I love organizational things and being a part of something bigger.
Yeah, again, it's just from my perspective, still being pretty young and seeing how these things kind of really get developed, and how they become reality. Obviously, all the work that comes behind it, it's just amazing to see all of that, and seeing like or meeting the engineers that are pioneering these efforts, which is, I don't know, I feel like they're like celebrities in the engineering community, if you will, which is kind of fun to like spend time with them and like sit in the same room with them that know so much about engineering. I don't know what your perspective is on that.
Oh, it's fascinating. To borrow something that one of my coworkers often says, she says that these engineers leading our standards development projects are the luminaries of our industry. So they
Wow.
have 30, 40, 50, 60 years of experience and practical knowledge, hands on experience out on a construction site, behind the desk doing design drawings, working with contractors and value engineering. There is no, I can't even envision when I will get to the status of having that much knowledge. So, seeing these
Mhm.
people and listening to their thoughts and their dialogue, it is really a special opportunity. You're absolutely right. I wouldn't usually be in the same room of those people, unless perhaps I worked for that same company. Being a part of ASC allows me to interact with those industry luminaries, as my friend says.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, any last advice for engineers, students that really want to get involved with an ACE or other nonprofit organizations, kind of the value that these organizations bring to their careers, and maybe some career paths that they could probably pursue if they wanted to?
Yeah, there are so many opportunities. I do like the idea of having a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan and trying to iron out some goals for your career, but you have to do so with flexibility. You never know what types of opportunities might be available. Think outside of the box. If you are finding yourself looking for a new job, look at all the different sectors of civil engineering and see if private, public, nonprofit, um, technical trade associations, see if any of those are a good fit for you and evaluate those. Maybe you want to go into teaching, maybe you want to be an adjunct professor. There's tons of opportunities for civil engineers, there's no shortage there. So keep your options open, don't limit yourself. Have those goals, but don't let those goals provide you with blinders. And as far as getting involved in growing your network, join a professional association. I would love it if that's ASCE. It doesn't have to be ASCE, and I won't hold
Mhm.
it against you, but join a professional association and start getting to know other people. You will get so much out of it. The more you put in, the more you will get out. And ask somebody for help. Say, what can I do? How can I get involved? Can you help guide me of what opportunities are available? And when somebody says, hey, would you mind leading this meeting or planning this golf tournament or whatever it might be, say yes, because it really is going to open doors for you and do a lot. But don't be afraid to raise your hand and ask for help. I mentioned all the numerous committees and units that ASCE has. I would personally be happy to guide anybody if they have any questions. They can always find me at ASCE. My nickname is LOL because my email address always starts with my first initial and my last name. So my email is O'Leary or LOLEARY at asce.org. And you're welcome to put that on the website too. Happy to field any questions. And like I said, I would help anybody navigate opportunities to volunteer because I know, again, all those stats are a little bit overwhelming. And because there are so many opportunities to volunteer, I do find that there is analysis paralysis.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of organizations. I'm part of ACE and EWB, but there's a ton more out there that obviously are doing great things, and it's just important for, I think, for most engineers to be volunteering and spending some time learning about these organizations. So um, it's great to hear all your experience. I just have one last question for you. That's how can we continue engineering our future?
How can we continue engineering our future? It needs to be something that we work on every day. One of my
Mhm.
hobbies is yoga. I am by no means a yoga instructor, and there's a lot of yoga things I wouldn't say I'm good at, but it's a practice. And so, engineering our future is a practice. We have to put thought into it every day. We have to be committed to continually growing our knowledge base, continually growing our networks, and not for a selfish reason, but because we really truly care about the public in which our industry serves. So, we have to be committed to working on it every day. Some days might be better than others. Some months or weeks might be better than others. Hold yourself accountable, but don't be too hard on yourself either. Balance. I know we've talked about work-life balance before. It's definitely a practice. And so I would say just work on it every day as much as you can and keep it moving forward.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming to the podcast, just sharing all your experience and the things you're doing. Where can people connect with you, reach out if they have any questions, or just network with you?
Yeah, I love social media as much as I can spend time on it. I typically am on Twitter and LinkedIn. Those are my go-to, I'll say, work ASCE social medias. I do have a personal Instagram. Sometimes I try not to do too much ASCE on Instagram so that I can take an ASCE break every once in a while, as much as I love it. So find me on Twitter, find me on LinkedIn. I'll make sure that you have the addresses for that in the bio for the show. And again, by email, anybody is always welcome to email me anytime, and I'd be happy to help navigate ASCE opportunities or even career questions, or if you have any personal questions for me. I'm always happy to connect. I'm definitely a people person, so reach out to me and say, hey, LOL, can you help me with this? What's going on?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll definitely link all of that in the show notes, and people can reach out to you if they want and have questions. But again, thank you so much for the show, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, yes, thank you. It was really my pleasure and honor to be a guest on the show, and I wish you luck on your future shows.
Thank you.